Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Calian's Immersive Learning for Skilled Trades webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to be presenting over the course of about the next hour. We're going to have Matt Thomas on screen here. He's the Director of Immersive Learning at Calian. We're also going to have George Schweitzer. He is our lead developer for our Immersive Learning Solutions. And myself, Jordan Miller, I'm the Director of Marketing for Defense and Learning Solutions, also here at Calian. So, for the webinar today, we've got a pretty tight agenda here. We're going to go through an overview of what the solutions look like. We're going to have Donna Burnett-Vachon from Hydro Ottawa talk to us a little bit about why they've chosen Calian time and time again to deliver their immersive learning solutions. And then we're going to go through a detailed demonstration of two scenarios, one for hydro and one for carpentry. And then we're going to conclude things with questions and answers, and then provide some concluding remarks for how you can access this content after the webinar, future webinar you can register for coming up in the end of March, and how you can stay in touch with Calian Learning Solutions. So with that in mind, Matt, when we talk about immersive learning solutions, I can see headsets in both of your backgrounds. There's a lot of technology that goes into this. But beyond that, why do customers choose us? What is the value they see? How does this deliver value for large organizations? Walk us through a little bit of that, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of elaborate on some of these points here that we have on screen. So first one's reducing the time to competency. There's a big difference from going into a classroom training environment or video training or even traditional e-learning, which is great. But when we're able to put somebody in the headset, it really immerses them in the environment, makes them feel like they're there. There's videos online kind of showing how immersive this stuff is when people are running into walls or punching their screen or punching their friend. We've actually had an NHL fighter in our office nearly take out our giant screen on the wall while in VR, and that's just small testament to how immersive this stuff is. Now, obviously, George is going to show us a little demo, and if you've had the opportunity to try any of our stuff in the past, you've probably seen how pretty it is. We try to make it as photoreal as possible. We can kind of see in some of these pictures, but they don't really do it justice. But it is quite immersive, really high fidelity stuff that we're trying to aim for there. So definitely reducing the time to competency, getting people comfortable with scenarios or environments that they've never been in. High risk, high stress, elaborate, detailed, hard skills training. We want to make people comfortable before they go into either a live work setting or live training. Reducing cost. It's a one-time cost, right? So we don't do any licensing or anything like that. You don't need to worry about anything like paying for actors or setting up training sessions or paying licenses or anything like that. It's a one-time fee. You pay for the solution one time, and you can play it as many times as you'd like. So you can go through 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000 people. It doesn't matter. You could be in your office, you can be at home, you can be on the bus, you can be in the bathroom. It doesn't really matter. You can pop that headset on, and all of a sudden you're doing training wherever that the subject matter is located. So reducing that cost, which is super nice. The other nice thing about it too that we do is once we build it for you, the title's yours. You own it, so the client can do whatever they want with it. They can light it on fire, or more common, they tend to have subscription services. So they'll access other folks within their industry, and they'll actually pay them a subscription fee to license and use the experience and train on it as well. So it's kind of nice. Improved engagement, kind of goes with what I was saying originally. It's very immersive. George puts it this way, people's competitive edge kind of comes out. When it is a video game at the end of the day. We are building video games. People want to do well, especially if you're in a group environment. You want to make sure, like, hey, I just did this in 3 minutes. Oh, well, I'll do it in 2 minutes. That sort of thing. Also, being able to actually track the data. So another amazing feature that we have within our experiences is we call it telemetry core. So it's a framework, piece of our framework that we have in all of our experiences that tracks all of the data. So we're able to see, how people are actually doing. We can go ahead and say the the scenarios are awesome and people are getting better, but we have hard data that actually proves it. So we can show that, it might take me my first run, 15, 20 minutes to complete the hydro scenario, for example, but on my third or fourth run, it's taking me 9, 10 minutes. And we can see each individual task. We can see if I'm doing well, if I'm improving in my time, if I'm failing, if I'm succeeding, or, if I am failing, why am I failing? We can pinpoint specific areas where, I might have a hard time using the multimeter or something like that. When we can determine that, we can take, me aside, be like, all right, let's focus on some training there.
So Matt, just let me hop in there for a second.
Yep.
If I'm understanding you correctly here, if you're tracking individual performance at every stage, you can not only look back to the trainee to say, okay, here's where you're getting it, here's where you're not getting it. Maybe there's an opportunity for remedial training. Is that kind of where this goes?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of the training that we do is kind of dangerous, and I mean this kind of goes to the last point as well. But a lot of the training can be dangerous. Whether it be dangerous weather conditions, whether it's raining, it's snowing. I mean, it's snowing 40 centimeters today. It's kind of hard to train. But I mean, the show must go on. We must still train and get out in the field. So we want to make sure that we're tracking how people are doing. We want to make sure that, if they're not doing well, then they shouldn't go out into the field, because that could be a danger to themselves and a danger to others. We look at hydro, we look at fuel, we look at, the Navy. These are all very high risk scenarios if things go wrong. But if the training's done well, then there's no risk at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, just one more question in there. So we can track individual performance to see how that individual is sticking to the training program, how well they're learning. I'm thinking for leaders and managers and companies, if they're training 100 people, they can look not only at the individual trainees, but they can get some sense of aggregate performance across the workforce based on that data set to figure out, hey, is this training program not just training each individual, but how well is this training our whole workforce?
Absolutely. So you can aggregate the data. Like, we collect so much data, we don't know what to do with it. So that's actually our biggest problem, is how do we export all this data? Typically, it's just performance stuff, but I mean, maybe George can talk to it as well. A lot of the stuff we do is we can track, like eye tracking, heat maps. I'll let you. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, the data is our problem as people who are trying to provide this learning solution is just having somewhere to put all of the data. So whenever we are creating experiences like this, we are gods of our tiny world. We have complete control over everything that's happening there. So as Matt was saying, not only can we get simple things like, did they complete this section or not complete it? How long did they take? But we can get information about their body position, about where they're looking, what they're touching. We can even get things like how much force that they're using. We can go right down to the most minuscule details. And the problem is I'm always getting all those minuscule details, whether I'm exposing it to you guys as data or not. So it's mostly about finding out exactly what the customer wants, because whenever we're building a telemetry setup, what we're doing is we find out what the customer wants and what's going to help them give their best training solution, and then we're able to provide that data. And we can provide that data in something as simple as a CSV file that you can then open in Excel or put into a simple database, or we can interface with your learning management systems and inject data directly in. If you have people logging into the VR headsets, we can take their specific data and apply it directly to their profiles. So getting all of that data in is not a problem for us. It's mostly about what you guys want. One of the things I'll talk to also is Matt was talking about the reduced time to competency. There's one thing that we can do in immersive situations that you cannot do with books or classroom training, and that's build muscle memory. Because we are in a situation where you physically have to do the things. You have to pick up the tool, you have to attach it to a location, you have to have a visual of all of these things. That allows people to build up muscle memory where it is instinctual to do things, to grab the pair of pliers, to switch to a drill, to even placement of objects in the world. If we're training on a specific big piece of equipment, knowing that where the pickup rollers are compared to the fusing head is a really big deal, because it can cut down so much time in the field and in training. Because normally you'd have to refer to a manual. It's like, oh, where's the breakaway of this device? Okay, it looks like that. This is the piece I need. Where if you've done that training in VR, you immediately know that it's behind this piece of plastic. I just flip it up and it's right there. So having the ability to build that muscle memory, having that ability to give the prospective learners a version of a thing that they can work on in complete safety without hurting themselves or others is just so key to getting the most out of this type of immersive training.
One of the things I always say, and maybe it's dumb to say it, but I really feel like I could deliver fuel. I've never done it in my life, but I've done it 150,000 times in VR. So I know exactly the steps to do. Now, I'm not saying that I'm advocating for, going and being a fuel delivery driver and dealing with all that stuff, but I feel like I could, I really feel confident. Whenever I drive by the gas station and I see like a commercial fuel delivery, I'm like, I see what he's doing there. Yeah, I know exactly what's going on. It's really cool. It's quite amazing.
And it's a little side thing. When you are the ones developing it, we work very closely with subject matter experts in the field. So we are not just like taking a book and figuring out how to do this. We go to the people, we get video of them doing it, and we're constantly communicating with them. And basically, we have to learn how to do it so we can teach other people. And that gives us a really good insight. As Matt said, there's some experiences I have done so many times that I'm sure I could do them with my eyes closed at this point.
Just before we introduce Donna here, because we're moving along the schedule here, I've heard you both say many times, we're not subject matter experts of what our customers do. We're subject matter experts in the process to develop the training so they can do it. Just walk me through that just quickly. We want to get moving.
Yeah, sure. So you're exactly right. We aren't the subject matter experts in hydro or fuel handling or in doing a replenishment at sea or whatever it may be. We don't know anything about that until we actually get into the nitty gritty and, like George said, start working with the subject matter experts. So one thing that we do, and maybe we'll get to it a little bit later, but we make sure we're collecting reference material and working really closely with our customer to make sure that we're getting every single thing correct. I mean, the more information that we get, the more accurate we can make that, whether that actually be the procedural steps or the visuals, making sure, like, if we get a lot of reference material, then we can make it look exactly like real life, exactly like it is. Now, one of the things that I often do, which is kind of fun for me, it's a cool, different kind of experience, is I'll go and I'll actually film. So I'll go and film every single step that has to take place. The other day I was on a boom crane, which was a little bit fun and scary and a little cold as well, but it's really cool. When we're doing hydro work and working up on a pole, we got that view and I got all the steps up there. I'm literally standing up there with the subject matter expert and they're explaining each step and why they're doing it. So when we go back and develop it, George and the team can watch that video back and get the exact same information as if he was right there.
Excellent. So we're going to get to that demo. We're going to show you exactly what that looks like. But before we do, I'd like to introduce Donna Burnett-Vachon. She is the Director of Change and Organizational Development at Hydro Ottawa. Donna, welcome. I know Callion's delivered, I think, 4 scenarios for you.
That's right.
I was just wondering if you could walk us through, why does Hydro Ottawa keep choosing Callion? What's the value that you get? How does your workforce enjoy these simulations? And just kind of the process that you've experienced.
Yeah, sure. So welcome. I'm excited to talk about kind of what we've done with immersive learning and why we chose immersive learning. As a local distributor of hydro, we also train apprentices, and our apprentices are coming to us, of course, fresh out of college programs. So they're young, they're used to very different ways of learning and engaging than I think our learners were 10, 15 years ago. And so we were looking for something that would engage them in a different way. And VR just provided this incredible opportunity to create an environment where they could learn tasks that we can't always train in the field as the full task. Because if you can imagine that, a live electrified event is not something that we can have our apprentices doing. And so we would break it apart in a learning environment for them to do it, but it wasn't the full experience. So what VR enabled us to do then was take full work procedures and build them out in the virtual world, where our students then could put on the headsets and work all the way through that work task in a safe environment. It gave them the opportunity, and I think, George, you used the word muscle memory, and I think that's really important, because when our apprentices do go out in the field now, they really can think through the process that they've learned in VR and work through that full front to back work process in a multiple of different scenarios. And I think that's been really key for us. And in terms of why Calian, well, Matt really said it all. Calian was kind of in our backyard to be able to do this work. So right from the very first scenario, which was a learning experience for us in terms of how you do this and how much engagement is involved to create these things, having Matt and team so close to us enabled them to come over to our training yard, work with our professionals, work with our instructors to really understand the work that we do, to shoot video, as Matt said, to actually see the tools that are used in the field. So when they're creating them in the virtual world, they're very, very realistic. And of course, use a good amount of creativity in terms of how do we make this work? And you'll see in some of our scenarios where they've added tables and things that will not normally be there in the real world, but a way for students to be able to see all the tools available and make choices in terms of picking the right tool at the right time, and finding ways through watches and things to be able to put in a bit of help and guidance for the students as they're going through it. So it's been really beneficial, I think, for our apprentices. We do work with Algonquin College to train power line technician students, and so we give them the opportunities to try some of the VR. And the other piece that, and I'm not sure, Matt, I think you actually, we do some of this. We actually use it as a way to engage younger students in the trades. So we'll take it out to career fairs and out to events with students in like grades 7 and 8 who haven't even really contemplated their future yet. And VR is a great way to see what working in the trades is all about. It's probably one of the most popular things that we can bring to some of these events to get the students engaged, because you just have to get their attention for a minute to see how cool a lot of the work that we do really is and how technical it is. And VR really gives us a chance to do that.
So this is really embedded in your operations and in your training program.
Yeah, for sure. So we embed it into our apprenticeship programs. The other place where we've been promoting it with some of our supervisors is refreshers. So if someone's going to do a task maybe they haven't done in a while and they want to grab a headset and do a refresher, they can do that. And we're looking for new ways to leverage VR as well, and new opportunities in some of the work that we do. We haven't really gone beyond our trades areas yet, because that's really where we've been seeing great success, and we'll continue to use it there. But it also, interestingly enough, gives some of our folks who don't work in the trades a bit of exposure to what their colleagues do. So, it's a chance to kind of put on a headset and see what is it like to work from the top of a hydro pole, and what is it like to, open up that transformer that might be sitting on someone's lawn and see what it looks like inside. For those of us who work in the office, we don't see that view of that type of work, and so the virtual reality scenarios, allow us to kind of really give people a day in the life type scenario.
Well, you have set that segue up marvelously. We are now going to move into the demonstration. So George is going to put the virtual reality headset on, and we're going to walk through, just like Donna mentioned, we're going to get the view for what it looks like for the user wearing the headset. We're going to be walking through two scenarios. So the first one is going to be one we delivered for Hydro Ottawa. It's going to be connecting a triplex. So we're going to have a little bit of working at height. We're going to have the use of tools. And then we're going to move into a scenario for carpentry. we know that there's a massive shortage right now in Ontario and across Canada for skilled trades. Immersive learning is one way that we can accelerate the training of new apprentices to bring people into a level of qualification where they're work ready, they're job site ready, and this technology can help us get there faster and with a lower burden of instructors, because the technology allows instructors to teach more students at the same time. So, are we ready for the visual?
I think we should. You guys should be seeing my screen, I believe.
Yeah, we see it.
Perfect. All right. I will, I'm going to go over and get in front of the screen for you guys. If the other presenters could turn off their camera, everybody will get a bigger view of what I'm doing.
George, your camera's still on. I don't know if you need that one on or.
Yeah, I'll turn that one off. So that because I will be on a different camera.
Yeah, while you're getting set up, I just wanted to, because that's a side thing. What Donna mentioned actually is something we've noticed a lot with getting engagement from the youth. And I remember going to a conference with Hydro, and the line for the booth was out the door. It was, and we see that a lot, but it's pretty cool. You know, it's fun seeing, you know, younger folks get really excited about the trades, and using the technology is definitely a great help for that.
So I'm going to start up Triplex here, and hopefully you guys will be able to see and hear what I'm seeing and hearing.
Looks good.
Yeah, we're seeing you on the cul-de-sac, and we're seeing the start menu.
Perfect. Okay, well, this is what you would see if you drop in to one of our experiences. You start off in the environment you'll be working in, usually. Sometimes we'll start you off in a little bit of a different area. But this is generally what you'll see. You'll notice here that we have a menu that gives you some options. A lot of our clients need English, French, Spanish language options, so we have those there. As well, you'll see the movement system. There's two generally big movement systems that we use with our clients. The first is called smooth movement, and this really allows us to move around while either seated or just standing still. And if you see, I'm moving my view around by just moving a little joystick on one of my controllers. The other option is a teleport option, which allows us to hop around the environment. It's less immersive, but some people do get motion sickness when they're in VR. So we have a lot of ways to compensate for that. And one way is to provide different movement options. But let's get started. So I'm just going to come over here and poke the start button.
Your task is to connect a new residential triplex and then install the meter to energize the service. Your PPE, rubber protective equipment, tools, and testing equipment have been inspected and verified safe to use.
So what are we hearing there, George?
Scenario, you'll be doing
so this is a narration that you'll hear in almost every experience. We almost always have an opening and closing narration, and that narration gives you a quick idea of the things that are different between the scenario as you would have it in the world and the scenario in VR. For example, the nice lady just told us about our watch. And so if I'm going to look up here, and we can see that I've got a watch in front of me. The watch allows us to do two big things. One is it gives us a little hint as to what we're supposed to be doing next. And if I push the lower crown here, you can see that it gives me access to my tool belt. Now, my tool belt gives me access to tools that I'm going to need when I'm up on these high spots, and normally those would be attached around you, but of course in VR, as you'll see when I put on the safety equipment, having access to the belt around you can be a bit of a problem. So we put them all here where you have access to them. A funny little thing about this watch, we didn't put the time on the watch for the longest time. We just had it as sort of a placeholder where you could push, and it was late at night one night when we were all up testing and trying to get through a big project, we realized we really should have the time on the watch, and so we actually put the real world time. So we're Eastern time here, and this presentation is going out at around 11:25. So that gives you an idea of the watch. Now, as I said, she was telling us about it. This experience is designed for people who kind of know what they're doing. So we're not getting a lot of voiceover and giving us exact instructions, but we'll see an experience like that in just a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started here. The first thing we need to do is get into this box. Now, this box, everybody has one of these on the side of your house. It's where your meter goes. There's a meter here. And normally, you never want to do what I'm doing. This is one of those things that should only be done by a professional. And one of the great things about VR is I can just stick my hand in here and there's going to be no problems. It's a really great way to do what we call training without consequences. You can get it wrong and nobody gets hurt, including yourself. So for right now, I'm just going to reach in here and check to make sure all these bolts are nice and tight. And then it's giving me another great thing that we can do in VR. Normally, you'd have to have like a pad or some way to figure out, okay, did I get all of these checks done correctly? And what we can do is we can actually provide you with the checklist in VR so that you can concentrate on doing the task. So speaking of that, let's attach some probes and we'll get our meter. And what we want to do is pull the trigger here and test. And what we want to make sure is that there is no connection here. So we've just checked that one. Let me move my probes down. Check this guy. And as you can see, every time I do a check, it's being taken off of the list. Do the check again, and another one goes off. And then we'll go down here and we'll do all of these. So we'll get rid of that one, this guy, do the lower two. Last check, and we'll check the neutral to the neutral. There we go. So I'll put him down, pull these guys off, and now it is time to go up the ladder. So we're going to
just a quick question there, George.
Yeah.
If you were to have done that task wrong, would you have gotten a notification?
Usually, there are two different ways of doing that type of reinforcement. We can either pop up a notification that says you're doing something incorrect, or what we can do is just not allow you to continue until you have completed the task correctly. Most people go for allowing people to do it incorrectly, and then we record that in the telemetry because that gives you an idea if they've actually learned the task. We generally have 3 different styles of tasks that we do in the same environment. The first one, which we often call a crawl, is a very hand-holdy, do this, now do this, now do this. The next step up with is something like this, which is a walk, where there are some things that tell you what you're supposed to be doing next, but we don't give you a lot of feedback. And then the last one, which is we often call a run, which is the type of thing that is used for evaluation. You don't get anything. There is no kind of feedback for you. You just have to try and do the task. And once the task is done correctly, the testing person will let you know that it's time to take off the headset, and then they'll get their big checklist of things that were done incorrectly and walk you through it and why it's like that. So we can go anything from us giving the feedback to the learner right to giving 0 feedback at all and having that all on the tester. So let's get up there.
Well, George is getting the ladder set up. I just want to let all the viewers know. So we run at 90+ frames per second. Just when it's coming through the stream, it might look like a little bit more choppy. But yeah, don't worry. When George is in there, it's 90+ frames per second, very smooth. So yeah, just take that into consideration.
Yeah, when we are running off of a desktop computer, we can actually push upwards of 120 to 200 frames per second. Unfortunately, if we're running directly off of the headset, Usually that's a little lower, as Matt said, around 90 frames per second. But just like all of us have experienced on our Teams or Zoom meetings, the speed of camera updates is a lot different for me than it is for you guys. So I'm going to put on my PPE because I'm going to need that before I go up that ladder. So I'm going to put on my belt, and then I'm going to swap out these just regular gloves for some high voltage ones. So there we go. I'm all ready to go up. So one of the things you may have noticed is that even though I was walking around, when I went to go up the ladder, I just kind of teleported up here. We found that moving horizontally in VR is usually quite comfortable for people. Changes in elevation can be quite scary and jarring. So we always try and make it so that it's easy to concentrate on the task and not being in VR, scared in VR. So I'm gonna just turn around in my belt a little bit here so we can see, I'm not quite as high up as I'm going to be, but we can start to see what the visual is like when you're up this high. And this is a great thing to figure out, is someone scared of heights? Can someone actually work at heights? Because this is when you want to find that out. In a classroom with a headset on in a safe environment, again, it's training with no consequences. The last thing you want is someone to freeze up in a bucket, 150 feet up working on a pole, rather than finding that out in a classroom. So let's get these hooked up. I'm gonna need some tools, so I'm gonna bring up my tool belt. First, we'll need to strip the insulation off, and we'll get the insulation stripped here. And then I'm gonna need to clean up those connections. So I'm gonna get out my brush and give those all a little clean. And then the next step here is that we're going to get some of these impact connectors. These are really neat connectors. They allow you to give a very high amperage, high voltage path while using a relatively small connection. Let's get a wedge out here, this nice big metal wedge that goes in between them. And then we get to do the fun stuff, because the impact system uses a special tool, and that tool uses the same type of blank cartridge that you'd see in like a concrete nail gun or something like that. And it uses that to be able to compress the connector down. So let's put our connector on here, and my grip strength is not going to be able to do it. So let's get a hammer and give that a good whack. And that has seated that wedge in. And now, of course, we don't want anybody to get hurt. So let's grab a cover and put that on. And then we'll quickly do the whole procedure again for the other leg. So we'll get ourselves a connector, connect up the wire, get ourselves a wedge, put the wedge in, get ourselves a shell, put the shell in, let that close up. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I'm doing, oh, go ahead.
George, when you talked earlier about muscle memory, I'm seeing you do the same basic task twice in a row. Is this the kind of thing you were referring to?
This is exactly what I'm referring to. This type of muscle memory can vastly increase the speed and the competency of the people you're training. As a rule, we as developers do these things over and over again. So we tend to build up the same muscle memory that someone who is doing the experience would. For example, in the very first hydro experience, the average time to complete the experience was kind of like 15 to 20 minutes. But as a developer who has done it literally thousands of times, I was able to get that down to about 7 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that I could have done that task in the field in 7 minutes, because there's a lot of things that VR makes easier. I don't have to physically walk around. I can use a little joystick to move. But I am fairly competent that if I had people around me who knew what they were doing, I could point at the things and say, do that next, grab that tool. And I would be able to easily walk them through a dangerous task in a very short amount of time. So here we are up the second pole, and now you can actually see into the backyards. We have various types of backyards and visibilities onto the backyards, because one of the things that you have to do when you're up here is you're checking the lines, you're making sure there's no problems, and you're checking to see whether everything is safe. Because if there's someone, say, coming out here and looking up to see what's going on with the weird person on the pole, you have to be aware that if something drops, or if you know, they are, I don't know, throwing a ball around in some backyard, a kid could easily hit a ball up towards you, and being aware of that type of surrounding is very important. So we're up here, we're gonna do similar to what we did over there, but these are actually lines that have power in them. So we gotta do something a little bit more safe. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cover up these lines with these insulated blankets to make sure that we don't have any problems with those. When we were developing these, we called them the crackers because of their shape and color, but they are just another insulating blanket. And you can see this shows you how you would roll it down to get full coverage. So let's get these guys up as well and get the second blanket on here, and it will cover up. And you can see again that we're going to do that same impact style connection here. So again, we'll go into our tool belt, we'll get out a connector, put it in, grab the wire. And if you notice, this is the same wire that we did not connect at the other end. So this is the first bonding that we're doing. We're actually bonding up the ground wire so that we know that when we go to connect at the other end, there's always a ground path for the electricity. And that's the type of weird little fact that you learn when you are doing these. So let's put that guy in there. We'll get out our tool and get, while that's opening, I'm going to get out my hammer. We'll get out our cartridge, put the tool on, and then give it a good whack. Take that guy off, and we're done up that pole. So this is the place where we're going to finish up for this demonstration. But as you can see, we would continue on to work at heights. This gives you a really good idea of the type of experience that you would be doing. And this is an example of what Donna was talking about with the table that you wouldn't normally have in the field. You might have a toolbox, you might have you know, a little place to put things down, but unfortunately they don't just wheel out a nice table and lay everything out for you.
So if I recall correctly, for Hydro Ottawa, we delivered this scenario. There was also one for connecting houses to the grid at ground level. There was another working with a transformer. There was something with underground cable access.
So, yeah, cable entry. Actually, we'll just take a quick little walk over here. A lot of those other scenarios you're talking about would happen here. So this is a in-ground transformer box, and we have the first scenario we did was connecting this one up to the house as opposed to doing an overhead line. Cable entry actually prepares you to go into a manhole because there's all kinds of horrible gases that can build up underground. And what you need to be able to do is successfully run the tools that would allow you to detect those gases. So during that experience, we again, we placed a table here with all the different steps that you would need to certify the tool to be able to use the tool. And then you turned around and actually used the tool on a manhole cover so that you could then go down and do work in it. So those are the experiences that we have provided so far.
Just mindful of time here, I think we probably need to transition to the second demonstration.
Yep, that was the next move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit out here, and I'm going to get my lovely assistant to pull over and show off the launcher, because for our next customer, we created not only the experiences themselves, but a way to easily launch a bunch of different experiences for their clients, because we were developing it for CLVR, but CLVR is then turning around and making these experiences available to schools, educational institutions, and others all over the world. So I hope that's on the screen now, and Matt, maybe you can speak to it.
It is, yeah, and shout out Career Labs. I think we've got a couple of folks from Career Labs, so shout out to them. We had a blast working. I mean, you can see this launcher here. We've actually built a similar launcher for Hydro. It's a great way to manage all of these scenarios. You can have additional training there. You can have some help. Your tutorial can be built into there. But the nice part about it, I mean, other than those nice parts, is there's an administrative panel as well. So that's where you access all that data, all that performance data. You can pull from there. You can pull from individual users. You can choose which date frame you'd like to pull from. And there you can just export it as however file you want, and then see how folks are doing. Now, the other nice thing about the administrative side, and George mentioned how Career Labs has subscribers all across the world. That's another place to manage that. So it doesn't have to be based on subscribers. It can also be the trainees that you have assigned to these tasks. So you can assign, 5 of these experiences, these training scenarios, just to George, for example, and he would be only limited to those. And it would be for X amount of time. And then once he completes those and passes, okay, let's move on to the next one. So it's a really nice way to actually manage users, almost like a mini LMS kind of thing, because we have that data and user management and login credentials and all that sort of thing. It's a really nice way to access and kind of host all of this, all of these scenarios. The other nice thing about it too is we're super modular when it comes to hosting. So we can use things like AWS or our own server, which is 99.999% of the time what we do. It's just easier for our customers. We find they have a lot more flexibility. They can access it. There's no like downtime, that sort of thing. So we host all of this on our servers, and we can just push updates whenever there's new scenarios, and it can all be run offline as well. So another big thing with what we do is everything can be run offline. So you don't need internet connection. Once everything's downloaded, you can access this. There's no need to access the cloud. There's no need to access any internet service. Once it's on, you've got it.
One little thing I will speak to that is always remember that when you're working with us and you want a specific piece of telemetry and you have it communicate with, say, your LMS, we always have to think about what would happen if the person who's using it loses their internet connection. Because the experiences can be run offline, we always want to back up the data and then push it to your LMS later, because that can sometimes be a thing. We all live in a world where we always think about being connected at all times, and then sometimes you have to realize that that won't work and we need to compensate for it. And that's one of the great things about getting the custom software from us, is that you can compensate for that. You're not tied to any one particular system. All right, so I'm going to get my lovely assistant to go ahead and start up Carpenter, and you'll be able to see that when we click on the actual action, we'll be taken to a page with more information, and then there's a launch button in there, and that will actually launch Carpenter.
So George, just mindful of time here, we're looking at about 7 minutes to run through this one.
Okay, so we're probably not going to get all the way through, but I'll start it up and we can get as far as we can. I'll just rely on you to give me a cutoff. So Carpenter, as I said, is one of the ones that we did for Career Labs, and it is more of the walk version. So this is going to give you a lot more information because it's aimed at people who are not yet carpenters and are trying to see if this would be a good experience for them. So I'm going to come over here, very similar menu to what we had before, but we also have the option of having a male or female narrator.
Good morning.
So now you're going to hear the narration.
The crew is all here today, nice and early, and we've got a busy day ahead. We'll be working on 3 different houses and doing a range of construction tasks to round out our time together.
One thing we'll notice in these scenarios here is that there's NPCs, the non-player characters. And there's one right there working away, taking some notes. Just adds a little bit more immersion there. Here you go. Get some dirt on it. Adds a little bit more immersion, but the nice thing we can do with these NPCs is we can actually interact with them. Not in this scenario, but other scenarios. We can actually interact with them, work on soft skills development, work on
2x6 beside the workbench. Grab an 8-foot length, and we'll cut the first 2 pieces of the header. Place it on the workbench so we can do our layout.
All right, let's go ahead and grab us a 2x6. And you'll notice my amazing strength. I'm able to hold this at arm's length. One of the things about VR is we are able to have whatever strength level that you want. What we can do is we can actually make objects feel more weighty by delaying their movement. So it's actually harder to move them. It's a really interesting thing. And you won't be able to, I won't be able to express it, but I would highly encourage you to jump in VR and try it out. Another thing that we can do is we can pop up this extra information. In this case, we're using these little pop-ups that give you information that's not directly related to the task, but is related to the job or the environment. We can put up statistics like if you're working with a specific piece of machinery that, you know, make sure that the torque specs are this, or make sure that this section is off or this person has been notified, you know, tag out, all that kind of great stuff. So I'm going to grab my tape measure, bring it down here. We'll see how close I can get here. 41, nice.
Right on, not bad.
Yeah, so one thing that we can also do is we can use secondary implements. So right now I'm just using a pair of standard controllers, but we do have access to things like pen controllers. So if there's a lot of paperwork in an experience, we can use a specific device for that. We can also create for you extra pieces of hardware to interface with the real world. So if you need to work on a physical machine, what we can do is we can do a data connection to that machine so that when you change something in VR, it will actually change it in the real world. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my spot here.
What's funny is we talked about not being subject matter experts until we actually get in there and work with the subject matter experts and learn about these tasks. And it might seem simple, but a lot of these techniques that we learn about here are the same. I was building a board and batten wall in my entryway, and I had to use these exact same techniques using the miter saw, things like that. It was kind of cool.
Yo, great work. We are going to do the same thing for the
Look at that line, beautiful line.
One of the hardest things, and nobody will ever tell you this, the hardest things to do in VR is actually draw on something. The very fact that we have it in this experience is kind of amazing. Most people will stay away from it specifically because it never quite looks perfect, and it's very hard to do without the actual pen. And that's why I always say that we can use those external forces, because if you're doing a lot of pen work, it's definitely worth having.
Yeah, and for a lot of these scenarios as well, it's all procedural, right? We want to teach the procedures, teach the proper steps. You know, you can hone in on your craft of making a straight line later on with a real pencil input.
Pick up a 2x4 and put it on the bench. Mark it at 41 inches as well.
So we're going to do the same procedure again. One thing that we often have in experiences like this where we need to them to do a specific procedure is that we won't allow you to go ahead of the procedure. So while the narrator is talking, we won't let you actually do the next task.
Yeah, and that's the difference there between as George mentioned, the crawl, the walk, and the run. You know, this is kind of between a crawl and a walk because it's more educational, more step-by-step, more guided. Once we get into something like a run where we're doing, you know, full simulated training, then you can go ahead and do whatever you want as long as you know what the tasks are. And those are all things that we can kind of determine in that main menu. Or it can be an administrative panel or anything like that, where you can actually determine and affect the level of guidance that you get. So if you don't want any of these highlights, for example, if you don't want any narration, if you don't want any text pop-ups, we can go ahead and do that. It all depends on you know, the competency or who we're building for. If we're building for very well-versed people in a specific trade, then we can make it very, very simulated and less guided, and then vice versa.
So unfortunately, we are running tight on time. We were going to show you George setting up cabinetry. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for that, but we are going to move into Q&A. I can see there are some questions coming in.
Perfect. Well,
there we go.
have you switched away from me?
No, you're still up.
Okay, perfect. Well, then I will just say goodbye from VR, and I will join you guys in the real world in just a moment.
Yeah, and we ran a little tight on time there, but if anybody's interested in seeing more, like we would be using a miter saw there, we were going to be building a door frame, doing some flooring, putting up cabinetry, using drills and screw nails and stuff like that. And we've got a slew of way more. I guess I can turn the camera back on here. We've got way more scenarios as well. So if anybody's interested, reach out. Feel free. We're happy to show this stuff off. It's we're very proud of the work that we do, and we're always happy to show off all the fun little projects.
Excellent. Okay, so the first question is about sort of delivery. So how long from the time a customer chooses Calian until we've got scenarios ready to show them, ready to share with them?
It depends. Yeah, so it is a very, it depends kind of thing, because, there's so much to consider when we're building these things, whether it be environment, the hero props, like the assets that we're actually interacting with. Is it multiplayer? Are we integrating real equipment like George mentioned earlier? There's a lot to kind of consider. Now, that being said, most of the scenarios kind of fall under the same sort of level of fidelity. And you're usually between 2 to 3 months, so that's typically where it lands. I mean, the nice thing about it too is once we've developed it once, we can reuse a lot of the same assets. So, George was just using, or actually I'll use Hydro as an example because it's a perfect example. A lot of those tools that were on that bench, that pretty bench there or table, we reuse in all the scenarios. Now there are some new tools that we have to create here and there. But we get to reuse all of those. It saves on time and obviously money at the end of the day because we don't have to build it twice. And then, yeah, we can always iterate and add new things. So it's kind of nice. So I would say between 2 and 3 months. Now, when we start to get into more complex scenarios, time can increase. But for most of the scenarios that we're developing, it's within that range. And that's typically around a 15-minute experience. Something like that. I hate putting time on it because, technically George could have spent an hour in there. It's up to him.
Yeah.
But typically, from start to finish, if you're doing things on a timely manner.
Yeah, I would say that from a dev point of view, it's always better. I know a lot of people like to do a pilot project first, and that's always a good idea, but it's always better to do more experiences at once because there can be a significant savings in each experience because we don't have to, we can economize on how we build props, on how we build systems internally to be able to give you more value for each one. In CLVR, we developed a set of tools and pieces of equipment that allowed us to knock out a large amount of experiences in a relatively very short time period, whereas some other experiences take a very long time because they're in a unique location, they have highly complex operations to do, and anytime you have to do that kind of stuff, it's always going to take a little bit longer. But of course, all you have to do is come to us and we're more than happy to quote that out for you and tell you how long we think it'll take.
The last thing I want to mention on that actually is our core suite as well, because that's pretty important. So another way that we save on time and money at the end of the day is our core suite. So this is like a growing enigma that we're always building upon since, I don't know, if it's probably close to 10 years now. So it's a pretty hefty piece of software, but essentially it's the building blocks that we start every single project with. So we're never starting from scratch, unless it's like the most obscure project in the world. We're never ever starting from scratch. We have interactions that we've developed. I always use the electrician experience as an example, just because, you know, in an electrician experience, you might be unscrewing a light bulb. Well, that piece of that interaction can also be used to unscrew a water bottle or turn a valve or do things like that, tighten something. It's a lot of the stuff that, you know, we know that you're going to have to do in most real world experiences. So rather than writing from scratch every single time, we use that. And that does two things: saves a lot of time, saves money, which is kind of the one. But the last part is it's tried and it's tested. You know, our code isn't written from scratch every single time, where when you now get a piece of software, like a finalized piece of software, it's not the first time our code's been used. It's being used by the Navy. It's being used by doctors and nurses and tradespeople. It's being used by all these you know, high-level industries. So less bugs. I mean, there's always going to be bugs during the development cycle. I'm not saying that. That's just the way it goes. But there's we've noticed like a huge decline in bugs and QA processes.
Okay, we are getting down to the end. If you could just be as quick as possible with the last question. What devices do we run on, and can customers customize the scenarios?
Yes, I got a couple devices there. I've got some more off screen. George has a bunch there. Pretty much anything, actually anything. We've never not been able to deploy to a device. We can even still deploy to discontinued products like the HoloLens 2, for example. And there's a few there.
The
so
devices behind me are the development kits from the original Oculus, and an experience that I create this year can run on these older pieces of hardware, because we make sure that our experiences are all using the same standards that we've always used. And then when you decide to target a device, we tell you what special features that device has, and then give you options to have that. But if you want to stay away from those special features, any device literally in the world that you can put in my hands, we can run on.
Yeah, and customization, yes, absolutely. We can do it during the development cycle. We do weekly show and share, so that's where we get input from the customer, anything they want. At the end of the day, this is their product. We can just give our advice and you know, suggest best practices. But anything that they want, you know, we'll work very closely with them to customize. And then later on, technically, you know, with Core, I know we're short on time, but yeah, you can actually make changes, software changes to the experience without having to come back to us and make a new build. So you can just go into a simple Excel spreadsheet, make some changes, and voila, it's really cool.
One little addition, I know we're running low on time, but the Core suite allows us to swap out what we call the interface layer. And if you've created an immersive experience, we can take that immersive experience, and for a very low additional cost, we can allow it to be done on a flat screen, from a web browser, just about any way you think of, because of Core Suite being this great modular system. And that's all I'll say about that. Jordan, you clean us up.
Nope, much appreciated. I think this just illustrates there is so much more to talk about than we can squeeze into an hour. You got the wave tops, I think, and then a little bit more, but there's still a lot of things I think we alluded to that we didn't go the whole way in on. So apologies for that, and especially for the questions that we didn't get to. That said, there's going to be a follow-up email coming out after this. If you registered, then you're here, so you will receive a follow-up from us. The video of this webinar will be available. We're going to be turning some of this into additional short video product that we're going to share. Coming up at the end of March, there's going to be another webinar. It's going to have Matt and George talking about immersive learning, and we're also going to have people in the health sector talking about on-site healthcare services and psychological services. Today's focus was really skilled trades. The next webinar is going to be focused on a manufacturing setting. So how to train workers better and faster, improve safety, improve the overall worker experience with healthcare and on-site psychological services. We have a white paper that talks about exactly that issue. Productivity in Canada is a major challenge, and we think that these solutions can help address that and make Canada more competitive internationally. In terms of what we talked about today, we have a skilled trades landing page. The link is there on the slide, and we're going to be sharing this content on Calian Learning Solutions on our LinkedIn page. Plenty of ways to get in touch with us through all of those channels. And there's always a sign up page on Calian Learning www.calian.com/learning. So lots of ways to get in touch. Thank you for everybody for participating today. Thank you for Donna for coming in to talk about Hydro Ottawa. Matt and George, pleasure as always. And looking forward to seeing everyone next time. Thanks a lot.